Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank, 1 minute at a time. I'm your co-host, Dev Sodiger.
And I'm your other co-host, Hugh David. And on today's show, we're going to be looking at minute 59, listening to the two NSA agents bicker it up inside their car of a morning.
And joining us once again is Kosmas, film reviewer extraordinaire, especially if you are fluent in German. He has a plethora of reviews up on IMDb, so check those out. Welcome back, Kosmas.
Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing until now, and I'm pretty sure that will continue today too.
I think we've got an excellent minute right here, so I think this is going to be a fun one. I was just rewatching this and seeing it loop over and over again and trying to figure out if they are actually swapping out the brown bag in the various angles and stuff, and I'm pretty sure that they are, because the one under the table looks significantly newer and less rumpled than the one that is in the other two when he's walking from the car and first walking into the coffee shop.
I love the fact that doing a minute-by-minute podcast means that we're discussing brown paper bags in detail at this point, right? That's the bit we've reached.
Yeah, it is unfortunately not a little green bag. Otherwise, that would just be a nice little added touch. But especially given the time this was made.
Yeah, true. Tarantino nod. But yeah, so for the people who are keeping up with us and following the movie through as well, the brown paper bag. So in this scene, we have Martin going into the diner on the main street in Grosse Pointe, and clearly for breakfast. And he's being observed by the two NSA agents who are parked across the way in their sedan, who have obviously been on stakeout all night because they're brushing their teeth and, acting like they haven't left the car for hours. And they're having a little discussion, which we'll come back to in a minute, because this carries on from what we were saying last episode. But then the brown paper bag is where another car pulls up, and it looks exactly like Martin's car, which suggests that these are both rental cars. Grocer gets out, Dan Aykroyd, and he's carrying a brown paper bag in his hand that could be anything, except he's walking into a diner with it. Like, that's not normal. You normally walk out of a diner with something in a brown bag, right? So we all realize something's off. And he walks in, and as he opens the door, it's like being in a Western for just 1 second. There's the jingle at the door. Martin sees who's at the door. And as Grocer takes a single pause there on the moment to identify where Martin is, clearly, Martin reaches for the nearest gun he's got, which is strapped on his ankle, but he has to keep it under the table hidden. Now, the conversation the agents are having, we started talking about this last episode, right? So let's just go back over their dialogue a little bit, right? What's apparent about these two guys is whatever moral compass they may or may not have had when they joined the government is fluid now. Okay? They're happy to take requests from an independent like Grocer. They're also happy to allow things to just happen before they step in and do what they do. And so there's a great conversation here. And this is from 1997, which shows you how far back the NRA's famous claim that the only thing that can defeat a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, right? This echoes those words where Hank Azaria's character says, it doesn't work like that. You got to wait until the bad guy kills the good guy. Then, when you kill the bad guy, you're the good guy. And that little phrase, that defines everything that those of us who are not American, who observe America and American gun culture, that pretty much defines how we see what's happening, right?
But it also sets up the recursion, right? Because that then loops. Because now you're the good guy. When the bad guy kills the good guy, somebody else is going to kill the bad guy, and then they're the good guy, and then it can just keep going on and on and on and on, which is the cycle of violence that we find ourselves in America today, right? That is exactly what happens. Is one person has a gun, then the next person has a gun, and the next person, and it just keeps on going. I also love complete tangent here. they are having breakfast in Cuppa Joe's, which is the cafe that or the diner that Debbie calls out in the radio, saying the next 5 callers will get a free breakfast at Cuppa Joe's,
Right.
courtesy of the long lost love of my life, which presumably was meant to be Martin Blank. So maybe Martin Blank is footing the bill for a bunch of random locals to have breakfast.
Which is one of the reasons he's walked in there.
Maybe, but I doubt that was the actual the actual person footing the bill. I'm assuming it would be Debbie, but yeah, it was just nice to see that they are actually citing the same location in multiple different contexts, right? Like this is
it's consistent. It's consistent, but it also gives you the idea that these are the only places.
Possibly, although I feel like, you know, it feels like Grosse Pointe is a bigger place than that. You know,
I agree.
I mean, it doesn't take a big place to have more than one diner in it in America. And actually, even as you look at the high street, the shop right next door is a deli sandwich shop, which is not that far from a diner.
Yeah.
So
one sit down, one's takeaway.
Right, pretty much.
Right, okay.
But,
yeah, and then as we cut back to the NSA agents and they're wrapping up the conversation, what I love is the way Steve goes, so let me get this straight, and just to lay it out for the audience. If we do his job, we're the bad guys. But if we do our job, we're the good guys. I love that ending. And Hank's character's like, yeah.
like, and then McCullers says, great.
Yeah, exactly. And then they both laugh. They both have a giggle, like, you know, like a proper silly schoolboy kind of.
It's the same kind of dialogue that Martin and Paul had when they're talking about Martin's job in that drive-by, where they're talking about, like, do you get dental with that, or, you know, is it an open market, or do you need to do postgraduate work? Like, it's that same kind of back and forth dialogue of two friends who are very comfortable with each other and are, like, you know, yanking each other's chain a little bit. Yeah,
very much so, and of course we're now about to see Grocer and Martin, and of course their relationship is not a million miles away from that.
Right.
I mean, so it's and it's professional, and we've speculated. So one of the things we did, Kosmas, when we started this podcast, is we kept trying to kind of fill in background that isn't explained anywhere, just for our own sense of trying to figure out how the film works. And we kind of have this image in our heads of Grocer and Martin having met when they were both still in the military or attached to some sort of military operation. Like, they were legitimized killers, right? They could kill for legal reasons. And that's how they know each other, even though they're both now independent.
Well, I think the first meeting they had, I mean, you guys talked about it, obviously, in the beginning of the movie after the first kill. They meet, and you can tell that there's a history by the body language of those two, right? I mean, it looks like or it looked like to me that Gross was a bit in defensive, like he was waiting for the other guy maybe to do something that he would react to, like pull a gun or I don't know, something. Like it looked like he was trying to if something happened unexpectedly, then he would be able to counter.
Exactly. And they even call it out in the dialogue as well, right? Remember that thing we did in Burma, that Nut General Quang, what were you, a colonel or something in that army?
Yeah.
They've definitely worked together before.
And they've also crossed swords before.
Yeah.
Because that Burma deal, you know, screws up one of them over. So I think, I think it's interesting. I think they've gone from being on the same side to being on whichever side is paying them. And I think that's the thing. That's why Grocer still wants to have this weird relationship with him.
I may be wrong, but didn't when Dan Aykroyd's character found out about the contract being late or given to Gross, didn't he say not him again or something to that effect?
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So as you say, like that again points to there being something in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's between them now, which that points to as well, is this sense of competition now, right? They're competing for the same jobs they work in the same space, but they have very different approaches to how they do it.
Although it does give some validity to Grocer's argument for the need of unionizing, right? If they turn this into a monopsony, then they can just charge whatever the hell they want.
That's the idea. That's the idea. And this is where we get the start of another bunch of wonderfully written lines that Aykroyd gets to chew on in such joy. Just, I love he's enjoying being the older gunslinger, right? Whoa, easy there, Chief. He's getting to be like he's in a John Wayne movie, right? And then I love the way when he sits down opposite him, he's like, I don't see hollow point aftercare on the menu. I love that idea.
Yeah, hollow point wound on the menu here, and I love that because you then get we'll see it in the next minute, but the waitress actually listing off all of these menu items, specials, right? And it's like some of these are so ridiculously named you could almost imagine a hollow point wound as being one of them.
Right, exactly.
Would you guys call that a dad joke? The hollow wound thing on the menu?
Kind of. It's a little bit dad joke.
They didn't call it back then that, but like
but it's that type of humor.
It's definitely punny, and it's pretty close to and it's some dad jokes there.
And it's very much Boomer versus Gen X type stuff here. Yeah. Cusack's Gen X, Aykroyd's playing the Boomer. It's in how they dress, it's how they talk, it's in their haircuts. But yeah, it's definitely in that joke. And so we're in a classic American diner, right? Red brick and Formica tabletops and metal underneath, and then you got the usual condiments on top. There's always Tabasco, there's always pepper, salt.
Although, funnily enough, it almost reminds me in a lot of ways of a transport caf. Even more than a diner.
That's the kind of things we always had in England, right? Transport cafes.
Yeah. I mean, in America, a lot of diners, you think of that brushed chrome, the kind of Pullman carriage look of a lot of diners with the bar counter and the stools with the red pleather on them. And here, it's that like the tables are already laid, right? Not only is there like China coffee cups and stuff on the tables already, there are water cups on the table already, and that's it's a little bit nicer than I normally think of, right? And I think that's maybe because it's a little bit more rural. There's a little bit more pride in the presentation, but I mean also those mica tabletops. I could straight up see those in a transport cafe in London somewhere.
Oh, I've eaten my way around cafes in various parts of Britain. It's like, I get what you're saying. It's as close as, certainly it's as close as we get in England to the diner culture. Cafe culture is very, very interesting in Britain because it also has a very interesting history that is a combination of Victorian England and the rise of affordable public transport for working class people, so they could take the train away from where they live and work and go on holiday for a day. And suddenly you need to be able to buy affordable food, and you start to get the invention of things like deep fat fryers and so forth, right? But then you also have, in the 20th century, you start to have waves of immigration that include Italians and Greeks in the 70s, and a lot of them get into the cafe business because it's close enough to things they know how to cook while still being able to then add some of what they do to the menu. So you get a menu that has like half a roast chicken with chips, which is very English, but everyone eats that all over Europe. But then you go into one that's run by Italians, and then in addition to all the English stuff, there'll be like lasagna as a portion, right? And then and so forth, and it's
or
just
a Turkish breakfast if it's a Turkish
right. And these days there's a lot more of that, but it's really fascinating. Because I know with America, there's a similar history to diners. I discovered from one of my Facebook friends through one of the film and music forums I'm in. He's much older than me, and he's lived through all sorts of stuff. And he was talking about some of his earliest jobs in the States he lived in the South, being in Greek gyros restaurants, right? and takeaways. And this is like the 1960s, you know? And it's like, okay, so there's this stuff is everywhere, but it's yeah. I mean, I love this culture. Brighton, when I was at university there in the 89 to 92, was you had burger bars and you had things like that, and you had like early Tex-Mex restaurants, but the thing that was the place that students went to was the Truckers Cafe, because it was all night. It was a 24-hour cafe, which was very rare in those days, right? And it had pictures of the food, and you just ordered the number, and then you could say, can you take that off, or can you add this, and then they'd ring it up, and it was cheap. And you could, and this was on the other side of the Stein from where most of the nightclubs were. So you'd go out, and then you'd go across to eat there, and you'd get in like between the rush of truckers at the late night and the morning, and you'd get in there in the middle, and you order, and you have your regular orders, and it just looks like this place, right? It feels this way. I love these places. There's so many of these places have gone in England now. They've gone. They've just been closed. They haven't survived. There was an amazing one in Earl's Court for years, and it was just so incredibly basic and traditional, and yeah, long gone now. Long gone. It's just such a shame.
Like Herman's, also gone.
Yes, God, yes. Our favorite place where you and I used to go for food during the horror film festival was Herman's the Germans. Did you ever go to one, Dev, when you were in London? Herman's the Germans?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. I'm sad to hear that they've gone. I didn't realize.
Yeah, they went, but bizarrely, just before they went, they opened up a truck and a single outlet in Germany.
Yeah, they are somewhere.
Yeah,
like not too far actually, but too far for me to reach them. Yeah, or
so
just go for a sausage.
Yeah, so they're not here anymore, but they are weirdly in Germany. But you always said, Kosmas, that as somebody who's grown up with the real thing in Germany, you always said that theirs was some of the best.
Yes, for sure. Which by the way was especially for the Fright Festers funny. I mean that part, but also that I kept repeating the sausage. You know, seems to be an innuendo of some sort, which I didn't know back then, but I am aware of now. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you Sharon. I'm gonna name check him now. He was, and I didn't get the joke because he asked me if I got a sausage, and I was like, yeah, I got a sausage, and then he was laughing, and so did you like the sausage? And I was like, yes, I loved it. And again, yes, took me a minute to understand what he was implying.
I hear you, bud. I hear you. This is such an English sense of humor about it. Yeah. Oh dear.
We are the Sausage Brothers since then, so we keep this going. Yeah, good joke.
Excellent. So so it's the next minute where they do the order, isn't it? So this was minute 59 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers and co-producers Dev Sulagar and Hugh David.
Today's guest was once again Kosmas, film reviewer of many movies on IMDb. And where can we find you, Kosmas?
Yes, there would be X and Instagram mainly, and I'm also on Facebook, obviously. And if you type in Kosmas, then yeah, my name will pop up, even the last name. And thank you for having me again.
No worries.
And hashtag Kosmas World, right?
Yeah, hashtag Kosmas World.
There we go. It will trend.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, you can find us on all good podcast players, presumably including the one that you're listening to this on. Definitely including Apple Podcasts, now that I've gone through the ringer to get that one live.
Yes.
You can also find us on YouTube, X, Spotify, at Debi Radio for all of those, and on our website, debiradio.com. And in all instances, we spell Debi the way it is in the movie, which is DEBI. So DEBI Radio. And
if you want to come and chat with us, find us at the Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. That's once more DEBI Radio.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't done